Hello everyone. I am TaSh, and this is a very special episode of Women in Games International's podcast, Cheat Codes. And I mean that very much in an after-school special sort of way, because I love those. Well, much like I love after-school specials, I really love being the host of Cheat Codes. Not only do I get to talk about topics that are near and dear to my heart, but I get to talk to some amazing people. So the following episode is sort of a compilation of those favorite moments from not just me, but a few of my colleagues. I hope you enjoy.
Hello, my name is Chantelle, and I'm the communications manager here at WIGI. One of my standout episodes for this year for Cheat Codes was the discussion with Rayner about identity in the gaming world. TaSh kind of set the precedent in the very beginning that there are two people in this world. There's one that they see themselves as their avatar, or they feel more themselves with their avatar within the gaming world, or people who are longing and waiting to see themselves represented in the gaming world. To me personally, I don't think I was any one of them. Growing up, I always just chose without a thought the male character, not because of their gender or kind of anything. It was just more so that they had way cooler clothes than the girls. And even growing up, I used to always wear things that would be considered boy clothing. So baggier t-shirts, basketball jerseys, like all of that. And girls are just often more known to wear like tighter clothing, dresses, skirts, like that's like what would be associated with girls, and that's what would be seen in the game. I never wanted to see myself in the gaming world as that because I wouldn't have that in the real world. So even though I never thought about it subconsciously, I think, or if I never thought about it consciously, I thought of it subconsciously. This episode really made me think about what was my representation, or what did I long for to see myself in the gaming space. And Kate really opened my eyes when she was talking about this one game that she used to play, and when they found this amulet, there was like a really cool ability that it had. There was a 90% chance that you can get cursed, or there was that one small percentage that you could change your gender within the game. And I was like, whoa, they're willing to, she's willing to gamble death basically in the game to just have another gender, or just because I guess that probably is what she resonated more with. And I was like, wow, that's really crazy to think that, because there are people who really long for that representation. And thinking about that and being at WIGI, it's really opened my eyes to understand what a lot of people want to be seen, and through the digital space, through the gaming space, anything that you can imagine, you can see it in the games. But having like easy customization within like skin color or just gender or just like different clothing it's just really hard to come by. It shouldn't be like that. And I think it's because the gaming industry in itself, maybe like before it wasn't as diverse. We're getting there where now there are options to customize your avatar. So like in Pokemon, you can do the different skin tones. There's like a girl that's not just dresses and whatnot. With like your Mii character, like in Nintendo, there's so many other options. And I think that's really cool. And that's something that I'm happy and proud of that WIGI is able to do, is like champion those change for those people, being in a position to do so, to help people find opportunities and get these people in the gaming industry. So we can see different and diverse stories and people in the gaming world itself.
So even if you find that you're in the majority, so to speak, there's a lot that you can do to help uplift those around you, and also to learn from that. It's more than just being the right thing to do. You will be enriched from the experience.
Circling back to what we were talking about with identity in gaming, I did not put two and two together always, because some people said that they couldn't be themselves unless they were an avatar. Because in the avatar, you can choose your skin, you could choose your complexion, you could choose your gender or not. You could really play with that and explore in those ways.
Mm-hmm.
what are more ways that we can create these spaces where people can play more?
I think that's really, there's two aspects to it. One is sort of narrative-based games where there are sort of specific characters with a storyline and a background. I think, some of that is having more, clearly having more diverse characters in these games. And that means a lot of things, right? It can be ethnic, it can mean ethnicity, it can mean gender, it can mean so many different things. But then to really work with the diverse people on your team and helping to develop those characters and make sure that anything that's being brought out is authentic, uses the perspectives of those people. And if not, seek them out outside your team and bring them into the conversation so that you have more characters that people can see reflective of them. Because, as you know, games were like largely targeted heteronormative kind of white males. And we've been seeing obviously a lot more over the last 10, 15 years and more now in terms of gender representation and queer representation too in games. It's disproportionate, I would say, to the actual playing audience that is out there. When it comes to any game with any kind of online community, I think it's really important to be able to put yourself in the game, right? I've always wanted to be able to do that in any game, has a sort of create a character type feature. I think, any game that's doing that now needs to really think about kind of what they're doing, not just obviously, one gender, but also not just like the binary either, right? So like being able to have, acknowledge that there's a spectrum and you can kind of mix and match these things. They shouldn't filter things out like, oh, if you choose
it's so rigid. It's so rigid where if you pick this kind of character, now you only have these kind of clothes. And I think, but I want this character, but I want those clothes, and I want this hair, and it's so rigid, and it can be very frustrating in that way. Super frustrating.
Yeah. And, I think ideally you should be able to, choose your, there's some games that say, okay, well, we're not going to say what your gender is. There won't be pronouns, but I think it's a bit of a cop-out. I would like to be able to kind of put my pronouns in there. And then, what is the voice of that character? Is it a male body voice or a traditional female voice? Is it androgynous? Can those things be orthogonal? Like, if I choose the male body, does that mean I get like the deep baritone voice or not? Right. So I think it's really important to be able to put this sort of diversity game so that you can really identify with your character. I would say, one other thing I think is really important is really just about online spaces in general. Really games, there's a lot of toxicity in online spaces.
Absolutely. Yes.
Whether that be, the chat that happens or the responses and the things that happen, in the game, and a code of conduct, having advocates within in those communities, but also really addressing, issues. There's a lot that can be done on the engineering side. There's never enough that can be done though. Really just realizing that any online space is a social community and has these sort of social challenges, and really sort of taking them on head on with your community team and with your, to try and have safe spaces where players feel they can bring themselves to that game is really important and something that needs to continue to be focused on.
One of my most cherished episodes of Cheat Codes was an episode that I recorded with TL Taylor. And in that episode, that's when the platform of cheat codes really started to solidify for me. The fundamental right to play for all. In that moment, I realized how important it was for me to use storytelling to help other people understand how important it is for everyone to have safe and secure access to gaming. And in typical TaSh fashion, we got off topic for something really nerdy. And we started talking about the images from the Webb telescope. And in that moment, I kind of had an epiphany of something that I came to understand about our existence and our significance in this space. So I hope you liked this episode as much as I did. About any key in the online culture of gaming. And I would love to know, what do you think should be the fundamental rights of gamers?
The second part of your question is one that I think about a lot, because I really think it's actually critical to think about the right to play and to leisure in healthy, non-harassing spaces as a human right. It's just a fundamental human right. And I think especially as gaming has grown as one of our main sites of cultural production, creativity, social engagement, it's also even more vital that people have access. Because in some ways, to participate in gaming is to participate in culture. It's just,
that's very true.
Culture now.
Yeah, I didn't think of it that way, but that's very true.
Yeah. So I really think of it as a human right, which it's interesting actually. When I was writing my book about esports, I don't know how I came across it, but I happened across a UN report on the rights of humans. And the right to play is actually listed there as a fundamental human right. I love that. So for me, the stakes are really high in like making sure our online and gaming spaces are accessible, open, available to all.
I like that. I do. I like that so much.
Good. Thanks.
So are there any aspects of gaming that you feel seamlessly translate to everyday life? Because most people really would like to separate gaming from real life, as if the people who are gaming don't exist in the real world.
Yeah. It's been such an interesting... So when I started my work on the internet in the 90s, I think it was much more common for people to think about the line between the offline and online as being very separate. And I think part of the work a lot of researchers like myself did is to try to show like, actually, there's a lot of flow between the offline and the online. And my first book was actually called Play Between Worlds, the worlds being the offline and the online world, because they're not bounded. We are full humans, of which we've integrated technology into our lives, and it's just a socio-technical mix that moves back and forth. And for me, gaming is part of that. Gaming never stands outside of culture. It never stands outside of whatever our struggles or issues or joys are offline. All that flows back and forth. And it's probably not surprising I have that position given what I just said about the right to play as fundamental. So to me, there's a power in seeing that interweaving and interconnectedness between the on and the offline. I think that also means we have to take seriously the ways in which a lot of awful stuff offline is going to flow to the online and get reproduced there. They're always going to be linked. Yeah. So we're always going to be doing work in both spaces and across them. And there's incredible power in that linkage, the ability to build communities together online, have meaningful experiences and relationships and make connections. I don't think what happens online is any less than, right? We can have really powerful connections online, but that also means that the harassment, the gatekeeping, the policing, all of the really pernicious, awful things that limit people's participation is equally important and serious online.
Hello everyone, my name is Maxy and I am the Senior Production Coordinator here at Women in Games International. And today I am really excited to be talking about one of my favorite Cheat Codes episodes, an episode that discusses in deep what it means to be an ally. It features Fernandez from Streamline and of course our dear host TaSh. And this is an episode that is extremely impactful. Being an ally, what that means and how to be a good ally are topics that are so prevalent today. And they go in detail and explain what this means, but also how can it affect other people. On a personal level, I came from Latin America, I immigrated to the United States, so I resonated a lot with people that have been allies with me, and also how can I be an ally to other people. Being an ally is understanding that we cannot control certain circumstances. Who is born outside of a border or who is born in a better place, and just keeping in mind that the world is different and that that's okay. that privilege doesn't have to be an ugly word. We can have more privilege than others, and we can embrace this privilege and use it to help other people. They go in deep about talking what it really means, that being an ally is a way of showing care for someone, and it's just such a basic trait of humanity, just showing that you can help and you can change someone's life, or you can change multiple people's lives, and that's just a way to start. I love this episode. It felt really personal. I hope more people are able to see this episode during our recap, and they can also understand and enjoy such a wonderful conversation about how can you be an ally? How can we all be an ally to other people and start making changes?
Part of being an ally is understanding that you have privilege.
Yeah.
But people take privilege as a really dirty word. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's the truth. I mean, I come from a Hispanic background where if you were to line up all of my family, you would see us from albino white to black. We have every spectrum of color in my family. And I saw exactly what it is. I benefited from colorism. I mean, my sister's mulata, looks nothing like me. If you put us right next to each other, you'd wonder if we were related. But I saw firsthand what that is. I know exactly what it is. And you take advantage of the opportunity that you have and you run through it. But then you have to remember that you had the opportunity. And then you got to go back for other people and help them out too.
Why are people so afraid of that conversation regarding privilege?
I think the problem is that people want to believe that there's a fairness to life. They want to believe that there's things that you can't control, that you should just accept it for the way it is. And as though that's like shirking responsibility. But I think in the end of the day, there's nothing wrong with understanding, accepting the fact that you got an advantage. That what it really comes down to is realizing that if you did have that advantage, why wouldn't you do that one thing that could help out? Now, I'm not asking you to go bleed for other people. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that you need to at least acknowledge and realize that you might be able to make a difference if you just do one or two things. And those one or two things may not mean much for you, but it could change the life of an entire group of people or an individual. And that's extremely powerful.
People pretty much pigeonhole privilege, and they don't necessarily understand that it's not just the color of skin or how you present to other people, but sometimes you know that you have a privilege because when you speak a certain way, people are more apt to listen. Mm-hmm. You have a tone of voice that people tune into, or you're pretty, or you are charismatic in a different way. Those are also privileges that people can tap into to become allies.
I think this is something that's totally true. And I think one of the main things that people got to realize, there's something called economic privilege. Mm-hmm. Economic privilege is one of the most powerful things in the world. I have money, and maybe some people don't have money. That gives me access to more. I mean, the US system is great. Look at the housing system. Let's use that as sarcasm for great. Education is dictated by property tax. Live in a rich neighborhood, kids are great, school is great. We can complain about it. Live in a place where the property price is crap. Well, you know what happens in the school system.
Yes.
And so that's the most simplest, easiest understanding. Everyone understands math, or at least basic math. There you go.
Yes, that's the thing. Yes. And I was a substitute teacher for many years, and to be in different schools and different systems and to see that live in action, and to be at schools where I remember a teacher asked me, "Do you go to your kids' school?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, I've been here for 30 years and I haven't seen a parent, and there's a problem with that." I said, "Well, what are they doing? Why? Let's talk about that," because she didn't understand that from where she was looking at it. She was imagining parents just were making the choice not to be there for their kids, as opposed to them not having the privilege of being there for and with their kids.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that. So my mom, she ran migrant seasonal farm worker Head Start. So it was migrant Head Start, right? I would go there after school and I would literally sit there and be with the children of farm workers. And I can tell you that only was ran because people did donations and because the US government did some form of subsidy. And they made miracles happen for kids that literally their parents were undocumented workers. And this is what they were doing for education. So we can even just talk about people starting from zero, pre-K, and you can already see how it begins. And again, it's not to make anyone feel bad, but it's for people to understand that that simple thing, that one thing of starting 10 meters behind the starting line, that affects your entire life. Unless you somehow get that shortcut or that cheat code to get 10 meters in front. And that's the extreme. So that in the beginning of my story, leaving the United States gave me the opportunity to effectively go 40 meters in front of the starting line. That's how it played out over time. But that didn't happen until 20 years later. But that's the extremity that it took.
Wow. So you have the perspective of all sides of needing an ally and being an ally.
Absolutely. And basically finding out that sometimes the best ally is yourself, which is one of the hardest things to do. And I would say one thing, out of all of this, finding the personal strength and the perseverance and the power in yourself to be the ally you need when you need it, that was the biggest secret that I got out of the entire journey.